I'm going to need to get. So yes, if you're just joining, make sure you are clicking on the word wall. Just a few key things in there to revise. If you're watching this on catch up, then watching this on catch up, sound like I'm working for the BBC. I will put the links onto Google Classroom so you can go and have a little go, little play. Just a bit more of an interesting way of doing it. And give everybody 2 or 3 minutes. I'm going to have a look at the leaderboard and see what you're doing. Just let me know if you're finding it too tricky or anything, because we can always do a bit of revision, then go back and try it again. I don't know how much is in the front of our brains, so just keep me updated, but keep an eye on to see who's finished and how quickly you've done it and who finishes first.
Miss, for legalism, I put over reliance on laws, and that was wrong.
Rules, was that one of the options?
Yeah.
So in terms of moral ethics, often it's not, rules is the preferred word for it, just because obviously sometimes it isn't like the law of the country. It's more just like a sort of moral rule. So it's just in a case of like that particular language. It was a mean one, I get that. But rules.
Okay, thank you.
Edie, you are the first to finish. Congratulations. Let's see if anyone can beat your score. Feel free to just have a little look through your notes. Guys, we're going to come back in about 2 minutes. So see if you can get it done in 2 minutes. By all means, have another go and see if you can beat your time. Jessica finishes in second place. Good job. Okay, Maisie finishes in third. So we're just waiting for Herbie. We'll just give him 30 more seconds and then we will continue. I don't know if you guys are redoing it or if you're just sitting and reading through your notes, but either way, we're going to finish in 1 minute.
You don't need to wait for me. I'm just setting up, so I haven't done it. Sorry.
Oh, okay, fine. In which case we will continue. So let's have a little look through this. Bear in mind, guys, that link will continue to work. So if you want to use it for revision in the future, then obviously just go back and keep going, keep seeing if you can beat your score. Just is nice to get that language sort of sorted, so you can think how, you know, the words that you're using, but also the second one, which we're going to do a bit later, is specifically about Fletcher's quotes. So for the 6 fundamental principles, it's his wording of it, and so it works as both a quote from a scholar, but also obviously when you're then talking about 6 fundamental principles, it gives you that sort of directness. So post in the chat, what is the answer to this question? What word is central to situation ethics? What word can you not use when doing situation ethics? Yes. Good. Agape, absolutely. Okay, we cannot talk about situational ethics without talking about agape. So somebody unmute or post in the chat, don't mind. What is our definition of agape? Well, what's Fletcher's definition of agape? Yes. I think if we put Edie and Jessica's together, we get that. So it's unconditional self-sacrificial love, if we go with that. So it's unconditional, so you love your enemy the same way you love your neighbor, and the amount of love that it shows is that it's even to your own detriment. You will show it to others. Where does this teaching of agape come from? What is it centered around for him? Jesus, yes, absolutely central to this. So what we're going to do is we've just done that quiz. I'm going to go through some of the main sort of parts of situational ethics first, do a quick refresher, and then I've got kind of it's going to be similar to what Mrs. Stone did. I've got 4 potential questions that you could get around this, and we're going to do kind of the agree, the disagree, the sort of in between points that you could get, and one of these might be similar to one that you might have on your paper, so it might be useful. I will make the PowerPoint available to you at the end as well, so you can obviously download that and keep it for your notes and things and make it into cards and do whatever else you want with it. So just running through first, and then I'll set you off on a little task. Again, if you need to be making notes as we go, I am going to give you a little what I'm going to do tomorrow is I'm going to print off a kind of revision booklet for you, which has got all of the theories in, but it's like sort of prompt boxes with like blank spaces, but it's for all the units, and I'm going to print them into like booklets, so you can, if you want to just drop by the RE office and pick one up, so you've got like a hard copy that you can physically write in. If you're happier just to type, I can obviously send you an e-copy of it as well, but I'm going to get this printed for you because I don't see you now until before half term, and I just wanted to give you that extra bit of structure to some of your revision notes. So I will print them probably period 1 tomorrow, so maybe drop by after school or lunchtime maybe, and hopefully they'll be done by then. Okay, and then you can, if you need anything else, obviously you can just ask. All right, so situation ethics. We know agape is central to this. We know Jesus is central to this. So we have Joseph Fletcher as obviously our key scholar here. He is the champion of this. Tell me, just before we get started, what type of normative ethics is this? Is it absolute? Is it deontological? Is it situational? Is it what? How? What words are we going to use to define this normative ethical approach? Any thoughts? I feel like maybe we can't remember. Is it based on the consequences, or is it based on the action itself? Yes, good, Edie, thank you. So it is situational, because it's situational ethics. So literally, is the clue is in the name. So it's ethical decisions are made based on every individual situation. So there's no sort of rules per se, and that dictate every action. And it is consequential as well, because you must consider what the most loving outcome of your moral decision is going to be. So the idea of agape, obviously from the New Testament, Jesus' teachings on altruistic love, that requires nothing in return. For example, the golden rule. What is the golden rule? Anybody? Easiest quote for the whole of Christianity ever. You must. Yes, Jessica, thank you. You must love your neighbour as you love yourself, also known as the golden rule. Fletcher's development of agape through his 6 propositions, which gives rise to the theory of situation ethics. Let's just double check that we are happy with these terms as well. So he's approaching this in a modern day situation. He has natural law. So thinking about the Christian ethics that exists, you've kind of got natural law, and then you've got a sort of more anti-nomian Enlightenment approach. So a lot of modern ethics based more on, oh, well, we shouldn't have our own sort of rules. You know, we can figure out for ourselves what feels right in every situation. That's your legalism and your antinomianism. So somebody give an example of a moral rule that might be legalistic. Tell me if that question didn't make sense. Yes. Oh, jinx, you both went for the same one. Yes. Do not murder. Good. Or murder is wrong. Stealing is wrong. Lying is wrong. That kind of absolutist fixed morality, which Fletcher rejects. Why does he reject legalism? Why does he not like this? So this is natural law, this is divine command theory, all these other sort of absolutist Kantianism, all these things. Why does he reject legalism? Why does he not like it? This is going to be one that if you want to unmute, it might go a bit quicker. Too inflexible, they do not create the most loving outcome. Good, because God is the only absolute. Nice. So yes, he doesn't like legalism because he thinks that individuals get overlooked. Yeah, and so he wants the most loving outcome in every situation. And he says sometimes with things like natural law, particularly if you look at something like modern day abortion or I don't know, lying or stealing or something, it's too restrictive. It actually means that sometimes the individual suffers, and actually immorality happens when you follow a legalistic decision. In fact, I'm just going to show my year 10s this week. Don't know if anyone watched the TV show that's been on recently called Three Families. It's got some really interesting insights into the laws in Northern Ireland, abortion laws in particular, and in one of them is that the woman is going to give birth essentially probably to a stillborn baby, and yet she still can't have an abortion because it's against the law, and you know, it's a very Catholic view of things, and you could argue that it causes more harm, and so that sort of legalism is too restrictive. So yeah, you get the idea. So legalism, it has this over-reliance on rules. By the time that Jesus, in the time of Jesus, the Pharisees, who were the Jewish leaders at the time, they'd created 613 what they call mitzvot, specific rules to uphold. So you should do this, you shouldn't do that. They got to 613 that everyone had to remember and everyone had to stick to. And that sort of legalist framework was really, really restrictive on the Jewish people. And because often they would break moral rules and not realize they were doing it, because a lot of them would have known what they were, and sometimes they were punished for it as well. So Fletcher argues that things like even natural law, which is kind of like the more modern version of that, is guilty of excessive legalism. Protestants also, who take the Bible literally, are, in his opinion, no better. It's too restrictive and overlooks the situation and the individual's needs. So situationalism is obviously what he promotes because it involves the principle of your community and using them to illuminate situations. For Fletcher, this means knowing when to apply the principles and when to recognize the exceptions. So it's not about abandoning all those principles, it's about following them, but understanding in every situation there may be exceptions to those. What is the other extreme that he rejects? So anti-nomianism, tell me about that. Why does he reject this kind of more, well, let's have no rules? Would result in anarchy. Yes, keyword there, Edie, good. It's this idea that without any rules, no one would ever have any idea what to do ever. or they would do whatever they wanted whenever on a gut feeling. And you can probably tell from just generally in the history of the world that when people live that way, it doesn't always result in the best situation. So this idea of having no laws or over flexibility in laws, that belief can that anyone can do what they see fit in a particular situation. Some Christians may believe that they have been led by the Spirit. And so again, if we're looking at sort of Christianity, you could argue that a Christian might do something, and when they ask why they've done it, say, I felt like, oh, the Holy Spirit was moving me to do this, or God's told me that this is what he wants me to do. Yeah, there's no consistency in those morals, that you can't create moral norms for that, and it's just it's to the other way for him. So he finds this nice, what he would call middle ground between legalism and antinomianism. You have basic rules, but you also can break them when the outcome will be the most loving situation. So we have our 6 fundamental principles, which we've just done a bit of revision on. So rather than asking about them, we'll just make sure we've done it. This key word in here, love. Okay, we could put agape as the only thing which is intrinsically good. Agape is the ruling norm. You can't have these 6 fundamental principles without these. So the question obviously becomes, well, okay, we're in this situational time. I've stood at a shop, I have no money and my child is about to starve to death. Can I go and steal some food and take food if I don't have it? How am I going to figure it out? Well, let's look at these 6 fundamental principles. Love is the only thing which is intrinsically good. Love is the ruling norm in moral decision making, and it replaces laws. Love is justice. Love and justice are the same thing. That's always a really interesting one to sort of pick apart. Justice is love, which is distributed. Love wills the neighbor good regardless of whether the neighbor is liked or not. And that's good as well, because again, it means that it sort of ensures that people are going to be treated with dignity no matter who they are. It sort of removes the individual's preferences from that. When you look at things like preference utilitarianism and, you know, often the individual can be overlooked if they're not like immediately part of your family, because it's unconditional love. You can't set conditions by it. So even if you hate that person, you still have to do the most loving thing in that situation for that person. So love is the goal of the act and justifies any means to achieve that. And I've written foal. I'm not really quite sure why. Obviously that's supposed to say goal. And then 6, love decides on each situation as it arises without a set of laws to guide it. There is obviously issues with these, because can anyone remember a general criticism about situation ethics in terms of utilizing these to make decisions? What might it allow? What could you get away with? Great, yeah. How do you quantify love? And also, how do you recognize what the most loving thing would be for all people in a situation? Surely that would be impossible to achieve. Lovely. It also means that what if the most loving thing to do in a particular situation might be to kill a baby, torture a child, gang rape? What if, remember, we can justify almost any action through this criteria as long as the general loving, it's more loving to do it than to not do it in the measure of whatever this love is. Is it a strict enough definition of unconditional love to prevent sort of more heinous things from happening? And just so we can see, there may be extreme situations, not common day situations. So remember we said that actually maybe it would be really useful and helpful thing for general day-to-day moral decisions, but in the pressure of a really controversial point, it might go a bit too far towards that anti-nominism and not quite legalistic enough to protect individuals in every situation. So then we've got our 4 working principles. So in order to make a moral decision, we have to make sure it is these 4 things. It has to be pragmatic, it has to be practical to be able to do it, it has to be relative to each situation, personal to the individual, and based on positivism, which again we can go back through if we need to in a bit. Fletcher's understanding of what the conscience is something else as well to remember, that for him it's a verb, not a noun, it's a working thing. So again, with natural law, you'd say your conscience is that kind of you know, that almost like voice of God inside of you, that kind of part of you which is telling you that, or helping you figure out what that right and wrong thing is. For Fletcher, it is a verb, it is a working action. So your conscience is you taking these 6 fundamental principles and figuring out what the most loving thing to do is in that situation. An attempt to create that agape, and agape still being that motivation, and agape can be the answer when applied to practical issues in pretty much every single decision, although whether the outcome is always right is obviously the thing that is a bit controversial here. So it's just kind of one slide there just to give you sort of general revision on those key aspects of this. Things particularly for your AO1 that you might need to dig into and explain in order to support your viewpoint. So this is just a helpful slide for that. So just ensure that you could talk about these and explain them and later then evaluate them as well. Any questions? Okay, so let's do our first sort of essay type title practice. Okay, so in your books or whatever it is you're working on, or make yourself a quick table, can you think of maybe 2 on each of these, or as many as you can think of? Is agape a helpful way of making moral decisions? Now obviously this is situation ethics, so but it's not quite. Is situation ethics a helpful way of making moral decisions? Okay, it specifically wants you to focus it on the argument of agape and how useful that is in making moral decisions. So 2 or 3 reasons why agape is no help, 2 or 3 reasons why agape is helpful, and then just some other views that you might potentially want to consider. I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to pull together some ideas, maybe 4 minutes because we haven't got a huge amount of time. And then can you please just unmute and read out what you've got, or have it already typed in ready to go, just so we can quickly get some feedback and then we can move on to the next, because there's 4 that we need to get through. Okay, so 4-ish minutes maybe. I'm just going to put finished in the box. Can you just like that when you finished? And then as soon as we've got everyone on there, we'll get going. Okay, so reasons why agape is not helpful, or no helpful as I've actually written, and reasons why agape is helpful, please. Okay, guys, so I know you might not be finished, but let's just whiz through a few of these as we go. Okay, just so that we won't get through all 4 of them. So let's start off with agape is no help or not helpful. We've got dog's now actually trying to stand on the keyboard. Get off. So the origins of agape in the New Testament means Fletcher's situation ethics gives little practical help regarding decision making in the modern day world. Okay, whenever you root anything in a text that was written, 2,000 years ago for that world, that era, you're going to open up this debate as to how useful those teachings might be in a modern day world. Now, obviously, there's going to be some clap back to that and say that actually, well, isn't love timeless? Isn't this idea of agape timeless? Isn't it still, still not murdering, still not lying? Some of that is useful, but obviously, there is that challenge that you could offer. Fletcher's understanding of agape means nothing more than a vague wanting the best for a person involved in a situation. This gives no specific help regarding moral decision making. So does he almost give like a almost watered down version of agape, or does he not specify it well enough that you could teach it to somebody in enough detail with enough understanding that they would naturally then go on to understand what they should do in each situation? So does he not give a decent enough understanding of agape or an explanation of agape to lay out those expectations for people? Everyday moral decision making can be complex, and the extreme examples given by Fletcher do not help when considering moral decisions. The rejection of legalism and anti-nominism by Fletcher's Situation Ethics makes more decision-making about agape more individualistic and subjective, which again can be a strength, but it also means that you're not going to get consistency. So 2 people could be practicing situation ethics and make completely different choices in a situation. And actually, does that make the whole thing completely invalid? Because if there's no consistency in it, then what's the point in it? So that's kind of a nice way to sort of show practically how it might not work. Again, if you can think of an example that would go with that, that would be good. Conscience, according to Fletcher, is not a guide since it's a verb. So it's not guiding you, you're creating it as you go. It merely describes an attempt to make moral decisions creatively, which lead to agape. So you can't let your conscience be your guide. Like, it's not guiding you. It's literally you're creating your conscience through the sort of rational applying of agape. So even that's kind of no help to you in terms of this. What do we have on the other side then? Anyone, any ideas? Ideally, unmute and tell me why agape might be helpful in making moral decisions.
It's inclusive. It doesn't have a preference.
Yeah, lovely. Again, against your neighbour, against any race, against any gender, against big groups versus minority groups. It is quite universally, accepted and about the individual. Excellent. Anything else? Sorry, no, go on.
It's a universally accepted concept. Like, everyone understands what agape is.
Good. And the golden rule of like love thy neighbour as they love themselves, that sort of self-sacrificial love, that is also common to lots of religions and cultures. So yeah, it can be universalized quite well. Good. So whilst the concept of agape is founded in the New Testament, it is timeless. Its application has been developed by Fletcher, thereby gives help to moral decision making. So this idea that agape is timeless. Moral decision making about something being good, bad, right, or wrong can be based on the extent to which in any given situation agape is best served. It actually makes sense that there is no sort of fixed good, but it is situationally based, and agape is actually quite a good measure of that. And the fact is, if agape is your goal, like if love is your goal, then how wrong can the decision be? But obviously we've got those extreme examples which can tell us exactly how wrong they can be. But it's a good motivator, to do a loving thing in a situation. 9 times out of 10 is probably going to result in a good action that most people would agree is good. Modern moral decision making requires the rejection of absolutist rules in favor of relativism, which leads to agape. Look at any modern moral decision making sort of preferences, and most of the people you talk to are going to accept that there are exceptions to rules. It's not easy to just say murder is wrong, because then you open up self-defense, then you open up during war, then to say abortion is wrong, but then you say, what if the mother's life is in danger? You say lying is wrong, but it's like, what if it saves a life? So to have this sort of legalistic framework doesn't seem to work in a modern day world. So your only option is really to change that. And so this using agape as a rule and having this sort of situational approach could be seen as useful. The 6 propositions and the 4 working principles of Fletcher's Situational Ethics provides a clear framework which helps moral decision making and leads to agape. And it's the sort of framework you could actually teach to children. Yeah, okay, it's quite a lot, but you could teach them the good morals to begin with, so that they could better sort of show it in their application to moral decision making. Although again, we get into weaknesses here, because what if people can't make moral decisions? What if they don't have the intellectual capacity? Is it not just easier to teach them rules? The concept of agape is a religious idea, but can be embraced by secular people, as love is seen as desirable outcome without faith perspective. Because obviously you've got that criticism that, well, is it only useful for Christians? Because what if you don't believe in Jesus and whatever? But again, you've got this idea that kind of unconditional love is universal, really. And then just other views that you could consider, whether 6 propositions, 4 working principles are helpful or not, as we talked about, in moral decision making. At the very least, allows you attempt to make decisions creatively, that leads to agape. In some, but not all, the 6 propositions, 4 working principles might be the only things that are intrinsically good. That love is the engine. Is it pragmatic? Is it using experience rather than theory-based, helping make moral decisions? Just some sort of additional views that you could obviously include in a question like this. This is a more specified way of doing it. So if it said, is situation ethics a helpful way, it opens up a huge amount of stuff that you want to do. A title like this focuses it in on this idea of agape. So you could talk about the 4 working principles, but you talk about it in terms of the application of agape, as opposed to a more general one, which I've got a bit later, which kind of looks purely at the situational and the relativistic nature of it, as well as just the actual love. Any questions about this, or anything that you've got that I haven't mentioned that we can add into this? Okay, so next one, situation. That sentence does not make sense. Situation ethics is what it should say, is a religious theory. I'm going to give you literally 3 minutes, see if you can do 2 on both sides. Yes, it is. No, it isn't. Okay, let's run through these again. Sorry, I know it's super quick. So situationist is a religious theory. Somebody give me 1.4. Maisie, you've been very quiet. Any thoughts? Or anyone? Some super obvious ones here, guys. Come on. Yes, exactly, Edie. Number 1, it is based around Jesus and the New Testament and Christian general values of love thy neighbor. 100%. Any other reasons people can think of?
I put 4 against. It's not really that it's not a religious theory. I think it just fails as a religious theory because some Christians would not agree with it because it like removes God as like the center of decision making.
Absolutely, yes, it does remove God because it puts all the pressure on decision making on the individual person, and God doesn't become the ultimate decider of what is right and what is wrong. It kind of rejects those 10 commandments, those other sorts of commands in the Bible, and puts all the onus on the individual, which is not very Christian. Good. This is what we are trying to pull out, these sort of more subtle things. So it is a religious theory. Why? Yes, because when Jesus is asked to sum up the whole of the Jewish law, he suggests that there is only 2 commandments. Number 1, you love God. Number 2, you love your neighbor as you love yourself. And this fits beautifully into that. In the New Testament, Jesus frequently is seen to oppose legalism of the Pharisees, those 613 mitzvot that we talked about earlier, on his day. Of his day. Oh, it's Pharisees of his day. He gives moral principles, not, that's what we say, hard and fast rules. Sorry, I typed this very quickly yesterday. Hard and fast rules. And so Jesus himself wants the people to show flexibility in this. So he says, do not work on the Sabbath. And yet then Jesus then works on the Sabbath because he shows that sometimes those rules need to be broken because he heals somebody on the Sabbath day, which the Jews said, the Pharisee was like, this is wrong. But actually that was the whole point, is that he was saying that in some situations, life or death situations, you've got to use reason. You've got to kind of, see that there are going to be exceptions. So he sort of models that as well. So it's a good example to use for that. Jesus argues that love is the primary evidence of genuineness in religious faith. So in John he says, by this everyone will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another. So the idea of like, you show, you could almost show your Christianity, show your love for God by showing your love for others, which is why when you do sacrificial service, like you go and, build a school in a poor country and you go and, you're showing literally Jesus' love through yourself. However, also, yes, we do have a few issues with this. Can we argue that Fletcher's reading of Jesus' words is highly selective? Jesus does condemn divorce and adultery quite clearly, and he references hell more than heaven. So, and he does set some laws as well, and some things that absolutely shouldn't be done. And Fletcher kind of just ignores that part of it. Jesus tells his disciples that if they love him and they do all that his commands obeys, this implies that there are commands other than love that need to be followed. So his commandments, not just love their neighbor, but there are other things that Jesus talks about in the Bible which Fletcher overlooks. The interpretation of agape as the unconditional wishing of the best for our neighbor is not explicitly Christian. In reality, there is little difference between situational ethics and utilitarianism, because are we not just willing the most happiness, the most amount of people? That's the sort of watered down version of love that's almost like promoted here, which is, again, a bit tricky. You can obviously argue back against a lot of these things, but these are your sort of most basic arguments that you would want to make here. Okay, let's just whiz on to the next one. So situational ethics is a successful theory for making moral decisions. I'm pretty sure we did this when we did situational ethics. Someone can tell me if I'm wrong. I don't know if we did this as an actual set essay, but I do remember going through this in class. So I'm just going to whiz through it now. These are your obviously more wider general successes and failures of situation ethics. So Fletcher's right that the legalist approach is inflexible, which creates issues. So that's a success. There are occasions when applying rules is unfair. Again, think about abortion for natural law, where if a mother's life is in danger, she's still not allowed to have an abortion. Situation ethics brings what you could argue is much needed flexibility. By putting much needed there, I've put that in bold because I just want to show you that sometimes when you're writing in these essays and you want to show AO2 and show some evaluation, you're almost giving your own opinion there, because you could say situation brings flexibility. But if you say situation brings much needed flexibility, what you're doing is you're commenting on the fact, or evaluating almost, that flexibility is preferable. So think about little ways that you can sort of tweak your sentences to get a bit more evaluation in there. So secondly, it enables the moral agent to answer difficult moral questions when there may be two conflicting duties. So again, if you look at something like Kant, what if saving someone's life and lying conflict? There's issues with what you do. Whereas here there is one clear principle, rather than lists of principles to follow and a hedonic calculus to figure out, like in utilitarianism. There's one clear principle. Does it create the most loving outcome, the most agape towards somebody? And that makes it quite simplistic to teach and to follow. Agape love is a good principle. The demand that we do whatever is most loving to those around us. We like them not sources us from personal basis. That's not what it was supposed to write. We like them or not. I don't know what I was supposed to write there. Like them or not base us from personal bias. I think it's to prevent us from personal bias, is what I'm trying to say. Difficulties. It suggests never and always are to be avoided. The theory has no clear boundaries. This is where we enter into this idea of, like, it allows potentially cruel actions like child torture and gang rape, etc. Because actually sometimes in morality it's good to have some boundaries. Removing them completely opens you up to a whole different issue. The concept of agape and how we may apply it is vague. In his descriptions, what each of us sees as most loving may be a matter of personal opinion. And again, then, as Edie said earlier, you remove God from that position of moral authority, which is a problem. McCary, again, a scholar here for you, he suggests that situation ethics is quite individualistic, and it involves individuals deciding based on specific circumstances that they face. It is difficult to see how this could be applied across societies. So again, depending on cultural influences, depending on, you know, a most loving thing in one country might be different in another country or a different context. So how do you allow any sort of consistency with that and a sort of universalizability of it? Where does the situation begin and end? We may resolve an immediate situation, but set up an unexpected chain of consequences that do not lead to a loving outcome. How far is it into the future do we have to calculate? So what exactly are we morally responsible for? So I do something which is the most loving outcome, but then something else happens as a consequence of that, and that's not the most loving outcome, but am I responsible for that because I set off that chain? Or is it? So where are the boundaries in terms of moral responsibility? That's not really cleared for Fletcher. Some thinkers have argued that in reality, situation ethics is no different to utilitarianism. This may or may not be a disadvantage depending on what you are trying to argue, because obviously having this kind of more universal theory could be useful, but not always. Then just sort of highlighting kind of evaluation chain that you could have with this. Sorry, my dog is barking at squirrels. Situation ethics is person-centered, which is whereas legalistic systems such as natural law focus on obedience to rules. However, with there being no moral absolutes means that there is no idea of right. Some people might be overlooked, for example, for the greater good. Situation ethics gives more responsibility to humans, and that conscience is a verb, not a noun. However, when all responsibility falls on the moral agent? Do we assume that everyone has those moral expertise to understand what agape is in every situation? So is it too much reliance on that moral agent? Any questions? Sorry, are you following this, guys? I hope that it's not going too quickly and that you're finding it useful. Hopefully this is coming all screaming back to you right now. Everyone okay? Okay, I know Edie's still with me. Okay, so we've got 5 minutes. Let's just quickly run through the last one. And then again, obviously it's on the video, so you can always look it back if you want to. Thinking about it being too individualistic, we sort of what we're doing now is sort of pulling out other ideas that we've sort of already talked about, but putting it into a specific title. This is a really specific question, because obviously it's about one aspect of the theory rather than the whole theory. So yes, it could be argued that it is too individualistic, because rather than relying on external authorities like God, divine command theory, etc., situation ethics gives responsibility and autonomy to the moral agent as decision maker. Thus, the situation ethics treats individual as adults. So it's not too individualistic because it does allow for mature decision makers to have control over their decisions and what they're doing. Situations and contexts do differ greatly, and it's important for that flexibility to be retained. Situation ethics recognizes what is right for one person in a specific situation might not suit another person who are faced with slightly different situations. Therefore, this power given to the individual can be very useful when practically applied in society. However, there is obviously arguments that it is too individualistic. Does it go too far? So the emphasis on the individual as decision maker could mean that the ethics could be very widely and definitely applied. That doesn't allow for any sort of consistency. Other thinkers who have used love as a basis for decision making have continued to recognize the importance of community for both ethical decision making. For instance, Bonhoeffer, we'll do a whole thing on Bonhoeffer next year. Bonhoeffer's community at I can never say this, Finkenwald, made decisions based on the communal Bible reading, prayer, and conversation. They recognized the importance of other people in discerning the right course of action. So that's obviously saying, taking some of that pressure off the individualistic moral agent, the individual moral agent. Is it not better to think about what decision you want, go and run it past somebody else and seek community inspiration, go and run it past elders in the community, look in the Bible for more inspiration, and then come to a decision? Is it too just like, oh, that's loving, I'll do that? Is there not a deeper sort of resource there that can be drawn on? And then lastly, Fletcher's view on conscience as being the key to processing decision making is a little vague for most in terms of its detail in look in my face, girl. In criticizing others who arguably misinterpret Aquinas, whose views are on conscience may be closer to Fletcher's than he realizes. This idea of applying reason and it being an active thing, your conscience. Okay, so those are sort of 4 possible ways of sort of looking at this topic. There are others as well, but those are the ones that I thought would be most useful to you in this unit. There is another quiz that you can do, which I'm just trying to find because I've managed to minimize it. Hang on a second. Which has got specific quotes for the 6 fundamental principles. So it's in Fletcher's own words, if you like. So I'll pop that on here, and if you want to have a little go at it by yourselves, please do. It comes up with a big, as long as you use that link over the next however many weeks, it will come up with a leaderboard, so I can keep track of who's doing what and when. Okay, guys, so you've got about 2 minutes. So is there anything that you just want to double check with me? Any questions that you have? Anything which we haven't covered that you would like me to go into a bit more detail? Or are we happy with that? Have we remembered more than we thought? Good. I'll show you the document. There you go. Now everyone's happy. Hello. He says, well done for your hard work, guys. Cool. Well, as I say, drop by the office tomorrow and I will get you those revision sheets, and that hopefully that will just structure a bit of your work for you. And if there's anything else you need on situational ethics, etc., just let me know. I'll get the recording put onto YouTube and then send you a link so you've got it, but obviously it's accessible through here as well. But if you don't need anything else, guys, I'll let you go. Thank you very much for listening, and I will see you soon. Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Miss.
Thanks, Miss.